In this episode, we talk about the attempts made by the Archaeological Survey of India to find evidence for Mahabharata. We also talk about the recent comments made by the RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat, seemingly about the current BJP government. But first, we talk about the residents of a housing complex in Gujarat protesting against a Muslim woman and her family trying to move into the area. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In an incident that highlights the deep divide between communities and the discrimination faced by minorities, a 44-year-old Muslim woman has been facing protests by residents of a Hindu-dominated housing complex where she was allotted a unit. As the only Muslim allottee in the complex, residents claim that her presence poses a threat and a nuisance. These residents had actually first begun protesting in 2020 and had even approached the district collector. But now, more than 4 years later, they have resumed their protest once again. In this segment, Indian Express's Aditi Raja tells us more about it. Aditi, begin by telling us who is the woman at the center of this controversy.
So it's a 44-year-old woman belonging to the Muslim community who is the only Muslim beneficiary in this housing scheme that was constructed by the Vadodara Municipal Corporation under the Mukhyamantri Awas Yojana government housing scheme. The housing draw was conducted way back in 2017, in which she was allotted one unit out of the 462 units that are constructed in the colony. And she was the lone Muslim beneficiary. She received possession of this flat in 2018 and hasn't been able to move yet because every time she tries to move in, she says that she's met with a protest. And so far, her dream of staying in a inclusive neighborhood hasn't come true.
And could you talk about what had happened when the residents of this housing complex first found out that she was planning to move in there? And maybe you could also talk about where exactly this housing complex is.
This housing complex is located in the Harni area of Vadodara near Motnath Lake, which is one of the local lakes in Vadodara. It is in fact named after the Motnath Lake and is called the Harni Motnath LIG Flats Colony of the Mukhyamantri Awas Yojana. LIG is low income group homes that were constructed for the benefit of a particular economic section of the society. Now, the residents of the area have also been allotted the homes in the same draw. All 462 homes were allotted in the same draw that was conducted in 2017. According to the beneficiary, the protest first happened in 2020 before the COVID lockdown, when the residents first approached the Chief Minister's office back then to invalidate her allotment, citing the Disturbed Areas Act.
Right, and this act is something that comes up a lot in these cases. Tell us what exactly this law deals with.
Now, the Disturbed Areas Act, which is actually the 1991 Gujarat Prohibition of Transfer of Immovable Property and Provision for Protection of Tenants from Premises in Disturbed Areas Act. Now, this act basically empowers the administration to declare parts of some territorial jurisdiction of the city as disturbed in context of communal clashes. And it prohibits the direct sale of property between people from different faiths unless it is cleared by the collector's office, who has to then certify that the transaction is of free consent. And as part of the process, the administration also interacts with neighbors to make sure that there is no coercion or threat involved in the sale. Now, this essentially applies to transfer of properties between two private parties. But this being a housing scheme of the government, the residents had approached the CMO to invalidate her allotment under the same Disturbed Areas Act. Now, one point to be noted here is that in 2017, when the draw was actually conducted by the VMC, the area was not under the Disturbed Areas Act. However, every 5 years, when the Disturbed Areas Act is renewed, new areas are included under the purview of the Act. And so the Act was applied in this particular area of Harni in 2020 is what the district collector has now told us.
Okay, so the residents approach the Chief Minister's office and then we find that this Act has been applied to this area. What did the police do after that?
So at that time, the Harni police station had recorded statements of both the parties, that is the residents of the colony as well as the beneficiary, and the matter was closed. Thereafter, the beneficiary claims that every time she visits the apartment to take a look or, she tries to move in, there is a subtle objection, protest. But this time, the residents came out in public and protested in groups, chanting slogans on 10th June. And it was just around the time that she had actually planned to move her belongings into her flat with the intention of shifting there.
And tell us, what exactly are the residents saying? How are they articulating their concerns? Are they explicitly saying that they don't want a Muslim person living amongst them?
Yes, it is as explicit as it can get. So, in the representation that is signed by 33 signatories who are all residents of the housing colony, they have called it a representation in public interest and submitted it to the district collector, the mayor, the municipal commissioner, as well as the commissioner of police in Vadodara. And they have clearly demanded that the dwelling unit allotted to the Muslim beneficiary should be invalidated and the beneficiary should be shifted to another housing scheme in a neighborhood that allows Muslims to occupy properties. The memorandum basically very clearly states that, out of the 462 houses, this is the one house that has been allotted to a Muslim beneficiary, and they believe that Harni is a Hindu dominated peaceful area and there is no settlement of Muslims in the periphery of about 4 kilometers around this complex, which is why they do not want what they call, and I'm stating it from their memorandum, setting fire to the peaceful life of 461 families, because they feel that with the inclusion of one Muslim family in the residential colony, it would lead to more Muslim families moving in eventually and lead to communal clashes, especially during festivals, which they have said in the memorandum. And they have also blamed the VMC for being negligent and subverting the process of law and allotting a unit to a person from the minority community in a majority dominated neighborhood.
And Aditi, you spoke to this woman. Tell us, what does she have to say about these protests and this backlash against her?
So we spoke to her, and obviously she was not willing to be identified. And at the same time, she was pretty firm about the fact that she has purchased this property from the LIG housing scheme with her hard earned money. And she was very firm that she is not intending to sell the property right now. She will wait it out and, look at how things move ahead. Her idea of applying for this allotment was the fact that she wanted to live in an inclusive neighborhood along with her son, who is currently a student of class 12. And she said that she has grown up in an inclusive neighborhood despite the fact that Vadodara witnessed riots in 2002, Gujarat riots. And although she has witnessed those times in the city, she still believes that a mixed neighborhood is the way to live, and, mingling with communities is very important. So she wanted to give that kind of an environment to her son, which is why she had applied for this allotment and also received it. And she was very joyful about it. But she is quite disheartened now that, despite having received the allotment as far back as in 2017 and possession in 2018, she hasn't been able to actually enjoy her property as she would have liked to live there and enjoy.
And Aditi, could you tell us how common such incidents are in Gujarat? Because in some sense, we find this happening in so many other parts of the country as well, where, for example, people from the Muslim community face problems even renting places in neighborhoods that are Hindu dominated.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the Disturbed Areas Act is the law which empowers the administration to declare parts of cities or towns as disturbed in the context of communal clashes. And then it prohibits the direct sale of property between parties belonging to different religions unless it is cleared by the collector's office and it is not a distress sale. Now, this entire law, it is founded in this belief that the two communities cannot peacefully coexist because of the history of communal clashes that have been witnessed in Gujarat, in many cities. And in Vadodara specifically, the Disturbed Areas Act has been very commonly used to file cases in the court by third parties objecting to transactions between two willing parties. So we have at least 5 cases from Vadodara that have gone to the High Court challenging the sale of properties between people of different faiths. And in all 5 cases, the courts have so far upheld the transactions of properties. So while it is a measure to rule out distress sale in communal situations, the law in a number of instances has come in the way of regular property sales between Hindus, Muslims, or any other religions for that matter. In many of these cases, neighbors have objected to the sale, citing violation of the act on the common misconception that the law is meant to prohibit sale of properties from one community to another. Whereas the actual ground or the actual principle of the law is to just make sure that the property is not sold in distress by one particular party. So it is very common, although we don't have the exact number of cases that have been filed under the Disturbed Areas Act across the state. The Disturbed Areas Act does apply to several districts in Gujarat, and wherever it is applied and extended, there are these kind of complaints from locals challenging, sales between private parties.
Right, and this case is unique because here we don't have two private parties. Here we are talking about a government allotment, and this is perhaps the first time this is happening. Are any local authorities planning to take any action or intervene in this matter?
So, while in the current case, the Vadodara Municipal Corporation, which allotted the homes, has said that it has no role to play now except for assisting the beneficiary by granting her permission to sell her property if she so desires, since it has a prohibition period of about 5 or 7 years before she can sell it. They are willing to allow her the permission to sell if she wants to. But she has told us yesterday that she's not looking at selling her property right now. On the other hand, the district collector also told us that the Disturbed Areas Act does not apply to government housing schemes or allotments of properties made by governments or semi-government organizations to beneficiaries, because the law is very clearly meant for transactions between two private parties or allotments by private developers, not by the government. So on Friday, the Gujarat High Court also refused to take up the matter suo motu at the insistence of an advocate. However, since the housing society in question is a registered cooperative, the beneficiary can proceed with legal action against the managing committee if she desires by approaching the registrar of cooperative housing societies or a competent court. Fortunately, the Gujarat High Court has held a very broad view in, the previous cases from Vadodara, where such transactions have been challenged between parties of two different faiths. In fact, the Gujarat High Court observed in one of its recent cases under Disturbed Areas Act that it is disturbing that a successful purchaser of a property in a disturbed area is being hounded and thwarted in his attempt to enjoy the fruits of the property which he has successfully purchased. The High Court has so far upheld the sale of all the transactions that have been challenged, and has also said that third parties such as neighbors are not required to be heard. And it has also noted that the authorities, while considering the transfer of property under the Act, have to decide only if it is a distress sale and not whether it will create a law and order problem, which is what most residents who object to such sales state and contend, and that is what the residents of this particular cooperative housing society have also been contending.
And next we talk about the Archaeological Survey of India, or ASI, the government agency responsible for archaeological research in the country. For nearly 70 years, the ASI has been conducting excavations at the site of Purana Killa, one of the oldest forts in the country. The monument was built by the Mughal Emperor Humayun in the 16th century and is situated in the heart of the capital. Now, the agency is set to begin its 7th round of excavation in a few months. And what's key to note is that the goal of all these excavations has been to establish a link between the fort and the Mahabharata, one of the main Hindu mythological texts. To talk about this project and what experts have to say about it, Indian Express's Adrija Roy Chowdhury joins us. Adrija, tell us, since when has the ASI been trying to find archaeological evidence for the Mahabharata?
So I would say soon after independence itself, when archaeologist B.B. Lal, who is very well known for his excavations at Ayodhya, in fact, he was the one to have taken up the Ramayana and Mahabharata projects. This is sometime, in the early 50s when he took up this project. And I have gone through some of his writings in which he basically points to this other place called Ahichatri, which is in somewhere in modern day Uttar Pradesh. And this happened to be excavated sometime in 1946. This place is also mentioned in the Mahabharata. And Bibi Lal, he mentions in his writings that, look, this place is also mentioned. It's of key significance in the Mahabharata. And this was excavated and we found archaeological evidence here. So there must be other Mahabharata related sites as well, which we should be able to find archaeological evidence for. And again, in his writings, he also mentions that, we are fortunate that a lot of these Mahabharata sites continue to have the same names. So you have like, say, Hastinapur, Kurukshetra, Bagpat, Mathura, which is Krishna's birthplace. So these places, he says that, since they still bear the name of the Mahabharata sites, so we should excavate and be able to find some kind of archaeological proof that shows that, our main Indian or Hindu epics, they did exist. And we do have some sort of material evidence to say that, whatever is written in these texts is actually true.
And so as part of trying to find material evidence for the Mahabharata, when did Purana Killa come into focus? Since when has the ASI been excavating there?
So the first time that Purana Killa was excavated was in 1954 when Bibi Lal, he dug up a trial trench over here. It was a small excavation project just to see whether at all we can find something here. And he found some stray shards of painted greyware. But apart from that, he also found like evidence for the Mauryan Empire, the Sunga dynasty from around the 3rd century BCE to right up till the Mughal period till there. But he also found these shards of painted greyware, which is basically a type of pottery, which is like smooth grey in color with some interesting geometric patterns in black or chocolate brown color on them.
And is this what they found in 2014 basically, which was supposed to be a major finding for the ASI?
Yes, this is exactly what they found. In 1954, when Professor B.V. Lal, he found these painted greyware shards, there were some, stray shards, not exactly a lot of them, which can establish a layer of human activity. These were just a few shards, which pointed to the fact that there can be more such pottery shards over here. And then again, once he located the painted greyware shards over here, he then did another round of excavation few years later in 69. So 69 to 70 was the second round of excavation. Then again, between 70 to 71, a third round of excavation. All three were done by Professor B.V. Lal. And even though he had initially found the painted greyware shards, in the consequent rounds of excavations, he never found any of them over here. Eventually, it's only 40 years later that in 2013, that the current ASI had taken up this project once again.
Right, and there were actually several excavations that took place between 2013 and 2022, and another one is going to take place this year. And you write that the idea has been to confirm their findings and to say that some kind of activity happened here during the time period of the Mahabharata. But when it comes to the material that has been found, these potsherds basically, how is the ASI linking them to the Mahabharata?
So that's a very interesting question. And I too had the same question when I started reporting this story. So what seems to have happened is that Professor B.B. Lal, when he had excavated the Mahabharata sites, so there were a bunch of Mahabharata sites he had excavated. Hastinapur, Bagpat, Tilpat, Kurukshetra, these kind of sites. He happened to find painted greyware to be the lowest cultural deposit. These were the pottery shards which he found at the lowest layer of archaeological evidence over here. Even though some historians and archaeologists, they do tell me now that there are layers which are older than them in some of these sites. But as per Professor B.B. Lal, when he did the excavations in the 50s and 60s, this is what he had said, that this is the lowest cultural layer of deposits. Now, what Mr. Vasant Swarnakar, his point is that since he had said this and he had established that all Mahabharata sites had a layer of painted greyware, and yes, even Professor Lal in his writings also say this, that we can for sure say that all Mahabharata related sites have the oldest layer in them is the painted grey ware. This is something that he has established. So the ASI currently is just taking forward or going by his estimates and his assessment of these archaeological evidence and saying that, okay, if this was established by Professor Lal, then we shall also stick by it and say that if we can find painted grey ware in the Purana Killa site, which is largely believed to be Indraprasth, capital of the Pandav brothers in Mahabharata, if we can find the painted grey ware shards here, then we can prove that this is a Mahabharata site. So this link between painted grey ware and the history of the Mahabharata is purely incidental. Because just going by the fact that since Professor Lal had already established this to be the lowest cultural deposit in Mahabharata sites, and hence we are going ahead with this same theory.
And so what do other archaeologists and historians have to say about this connection that the ASI is making? Because, I mean, just because they found these potsherds, that doesn't necessarily prove that Mahabharata happened. It could simply mean that Mahabharata took inspiration from what was going on during the time it was written.
You know, I was very surprised that the current Director General of ASI, Mr. Y.S. Rawat, he himself was very unsure of this sort of linking of the painted grey ware with Mahabharata sites. And he clearly mentioned to me that, as an archaeologist, I can't say that this is a Mahabharata site because we don't know when the events of Mahabharata happened. There's a whole other debate on when was the Mahabharata written, when exactly did, if at all we are considering this to be truth, whatever is mentioned in the epic, then when they happened exactly, there is no consensus among historians and, experts of these epics to say that when exactly they happened. Also, again, scholars say this over and again that the nature of the Mahabharata epic, it is very clear it was written over a course of few centuries by different people. So it is very hard to say when the exact events happened. So it is, again, the fact that we found pottery shards over here says very little about its linking to the Mahabharata. This is something that the current Director General of ASI, Mr. Rawat, had told me. Then another former ASI officer, R.S. Bisht, who's again, he's very well known for his work on Indus Valley civilization sites. When I had asked him about this, he too said that, this entire linking of painted grey ware with Mahabharata is purely based on the fact that this is how Professor Lal had done it. That is it. There is no other logic or no other rationale around it. Professor Upinder Singh, who has done a lot of work on the epics and their historicities, she in fact told me that the fact that you find painted grey ware over here, it only proves that, this is a very ancient site. So painted grey ware scientifically can be dated to about 1000 BCE.
Yeah, and I'm sure these potsherds can be found at plenty of other sites as well, right?
Exactly. So, in fact, Professor B.B. Lal, in one of his books, he has listed about 30-40 sites in which painted grey ware has been found. Among them, a handful are basically names taken from the Mahabharata. The rest are, yes, around this belt of the Ganga-Yamuna region, the North India, Central India belt, you have a lot of sites over here where these painted grey ware shards have been found. Professor Upinder Singh, she told me that, you have a lot of sites around Delhi itself, which are not in any way related to the Mahabharata story, where painted grey ware has been found. So the only thing that the evidence of painted grey ware in Purana Killa proves is that it is also an ancient site, maybe human activity took place here, as far back in time as 1000 BC. Whether it is a Mahabharata site or not, no one has any solid proof on that.
And Adrija, when we talk about making such connections that attempt to sort of prove Hindu mythological texts, could you talk about what other attempts have been made in that regard?
Of course, the best example would be the whole controversy and debate around Ram Janmabhoomi in Ayodhya, which is believed to be the site of the birthplace of Lord Ram, and how the excavations and what they proved, all of that has been debated on extensively. In more recent times, you have the example of Keeladi, which is going on in Tamil Nadu. This again is a site from the Sangam literatures. So every time you have a mythological text being proved through archaeological excavations, there's also a lot of popular excitement around it. So there's also this attempt to find more sites which we find in our traditional religious literature Because it is popular, it's, people are emotional about them. There is a sensitivity attached to these sites because we have grown up reading about them. There's a cultural aspect to these things. So they have happened in the past, and there is a whole lot of politics around them as well.
And when we talk about mythological texts and attempts to find evidence for them, have we seen other countries do this as well? Do other countries do this?
So, I haven't done a lot of work on this, but I recently found out that there's an entire school of archaeology called biblical archaeology, which sort of emerged in the 19th century among American and British archaeologists. This is the time when Palestine became a British mandate. So there were a lot of attempts to prove the Hebrew Bible through archaeological evidence, or to find archaeological evidence of the Hebrew Bible, and largely these efforts were being funded by the churches and were being headed by theologians. So it has happened in other countries also, and I'm sure if I dig in a little more, I'll definitely find similar examples in other parts of the world as well.
And in the end, we talk about the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or the RSS, the ideological parent of the BJP. Last week, RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat, in his first public remarks on the outcome of the elections in which the BJP fell short of a majority in the Lok Sabha, said that a true Sevak, that is someone who serves the people, does not have arrogance and works without causing any hurt to others. Referring to the bitter poll campaign, he said decorum was not maintained and that elections should be viewed as competition and not war. When we spoke to Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary about these comments, he explained the context behind them.
Look, there are two contexts to Mohan Bhagwat's statements, and that is one, an interview that was published in the Indian Express of BJP President Mr. JP Nadda, where he suggested that BJP had reached a stage in terms of organization where it did not need the support of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Now, this riled up the cadres of the Sangh, as we know, where they felt slighted. They felt that, we have always supported the party and we are on the ground for it, and now it is saying that it doesn't need us. So more so in the cadres, there was some bit of resentment to that. And two was, when the party actually eventually fell short of majority, being restricted to 240 seats. And then there were murmurs within the BJP that the RSS, did not come out and support the party. So it was in this context that perhaps it is speculated that the Sarsang Chalak, that is Mohan Bhagwat, made those statements where he said that, where he suggested that the people at the helm of affairs in the BJP had developed some sort of arrogance. Although the RSS has denied, although not officially, but, in its briefings, it is denied that, Mr. Bhagwat's comments were directed towards the Prime Minister. And it says that they were a general comment about any RSS Swayamsevak, although, mind you, Mr. Modi has been a lifetime Pracharak and Swayamsevak himself. And two, they have said that it is not true that RSS did not go on the ground or did not support the BJP. And they say that they held some 20 lakh meetings in the run-up to elections. And so they were pretty much there on the ground. They say that, of course, they cannot, go to every voter and door to door because that's the job of the BJP. It has its own organization, and that RSS is a socio-cultural organization and it canvasses on larger issues of national importance.
And Deeptiman, how significant is it for the RSS chief to make these statements? And has he made these statements before, when we look at the period post-2014?
We have to understand this in this context that never before has there been a saffron party in full majority at the center. It was only under Narendra Modi that there was a BJP government which did not need the support of allies. And it was headed by a person who believed in muscular politics and whose leadership style is said to be one where the power is totally centered around him. So this was a new experience for the RSS, which had earlier seen a government under the Atal Bihari Vajpayee, where it had a lot of say in how the government functioned, who was appointed where and other things. And it even pushed its agenda with greater ferocity. So even though there has been some bit of discomfort between the RSS and the BJP in the past 10 years when Mr. Narendra Modi has been in power, because RSS believes that, organization is superior to individual, and that the primary goal of RSS has always believed that BJP is one of its fronts and that RSS is far bigger than the BJP. And so in a way, somewhere in the subconscious, it is there that the BJP must be subservient to the larger goal of the organization, which is the RSS. So there has been some discomfort, but it has never been openly articulated because BJP was in a very, very strong position until now. And now that the BJP has been reduced to less than the simple majority in the parliament, perhaps some would say that the RSS has probably found an opportunity for making some sort of course correction in the way BJP approaches national politics.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.